Okay, so we're going to work out the S now while I'm waiting on the cape to get done. So what I've been doing is off camera is I've been using my ruler and I've been trying to get out my blue pencil, and I'm just kind of doing all my markings. Now her S is very large. It's like overly large for her, so it's kind of like that 90s style where it's like the WB animated stuff too back in the day. So I'm just trying to copy that as much as I can. Now there's a few things that are going on with this. We're going to do it where it's raised off her chest. It's easiest that way because I would love to score it into there to make it look like it's part of the, white shirt. But the only problem with that, though, is scoring into resin is a nightmare. You can never get stuff really clean because it's like scoring into rock. Now, if this was all sculpted in Aves and then it was cured, I would be able to do some scoring. It wouldn't be super clean yet, but I could get to a point where it's almost clean. But still, it's not going to be as where I want it. Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to wait for a day when I have extra Aves. Maybe like, if Aves has been sitting around for an hour or so, it'll be a little bit harder. So this way what I can do is I can roll it out fairly thin, and then I can do the diamond first. So when I work out the diamond and I use like safety solvent, I'm going to lose some of the S around the edge. But as long as the center S is still there, I can always rework those lines after I sand the diamond down and then work out the S. Now, you may be saying, why don't you just roll out a thing of Aves, cut out the triangle, and then just score into the Aves, and everything is raised together. You can do that, but the only problem I have is sometimes I could just never get the lines correctly. And the only other problem, though, is like say you're using a dentist tool and you put the line this way when you wanted to do it that way. Then when you try to like seam it up again, the Ave starts to go like this. It starts to warp and stuff. So I rather just work on the triangle first, and then the S, and then plus it'll be easier to paint the yellow, and then throw in like some some silly putty, and then do the red, and then all of a sudden pull it off and you're done. So that's kind of where I'm going with it, just to make life a little bit easier, kind of make it look a little, stand out a bit. So hopefully the next day or two, if I have some extra A's, we can start working on this. Okay, so this S part of the diamond worked out pretty good. I had the A's for about an hour or so working on some other items, and it was just at the point where it was hard enough where I can roll it out nice and thin, cut my strips, but it was still soft enough where I can actually connect the corners. I mean, they're not perfectly, like, they're all kind of like up and down, so when you sand that down, it'll be nice and smooth. So that's what you got to find nowadays. You got to kind of learn to work with it where when you first mix it together, it's super soft. You could mush it, do whatever you need to do. And then as time goes on, it gets tougher. And if you wanted to do like a cape or strips and stuff like that, you got to learn to just let it sit and cure. But you got to find that time to do it, because if you go too long, what happened was once I was finishing up this diamond, the other A's that was sitting down on the side was really starting to get tough. So it took me a long time to use some safety solvent, like 3 minutes worth of just mashing safety solvent and mashing it together so I can utilize the rest of it to kind of work out some more of the cloud. So, you know, I just don't want to waste all the saves when I work on it. So something like this is working out pretty cool. And now I'm thinking about it too, like I might do an explosion base now too, where it's kind of like dark black going into like a white. I don't know. We'll see what happens down the line. But so I had to order a new thing of A's because I just ran out. And when I get the new A's, it's going to be really soft and it's going to be really like you could really mush it around. So that'll probably be a little bit easier to do the S with the curves, because like trying to make the S right now with like stiffer A's is kind of a pain. So we'll see what happens with the next step. Alright, so I got the Aves in and working on some other items, so I had a little bit extra. So I figured, what the heck, let's get this going. So I'm trying to like stylize it a little bit, like I've seen in the artworks with it. It's a little bit bigger and you know, it's not as like perfect. It's just the way some artists draw it. So I'm just kind of getting in there and just working it out. Got the basic shapes going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this stiffen up for a little bit. It's really soft since it's like fresh Aves from the Ave studio. So it's going to take a little while. It's only been like maybe, I don't know, 40 minutes now and it's still fairly soft. So it usually takes some time. So I'm going to let this stiffen up a little bit. Off camera, I'll probably try to clean up some edges here and there. This little triangle piece at the top over there, I'll probably kind of use my X-Acto knife down the line to chip it out a little bit more. It's very hard to get in there. But I just kind of want to get the edges going. I don't mind if it's like sticking up at the edges, because when I sand it all down, it'll come together. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. Alright, so we're going to attach the right leg on there. I think it's a good time to do it because I've been working on the clouds a little bit more here and there when I have extra A's. But I think at this point we're going to be stopping. But I wanted to make sure I didn't go up too high over here. So when you put on the leg here, it goes pretty well, but if I was to actually go up here and not pay attention, I would have screwed all that up. So Once I get this on here, I think I might build around this foot a little bit. I'm not really sure yet how far I'm going to go with that. But I just want to get this leg on now because it'll help me with the base. I can start planning out the skirt a little bit more. And then maybe once I get the, what you want to call it, the cape, I could start up the hair and then figure out what I'm going to do with the hands and the arms. I'm still debating yet if I'm going to make them removable or not, but that might be last. So I just take some Magic Sculpt, just put it in here. Let's see, just want to make sure we're getting in there pretty far. I already did the one night I had extra Aves, so I put Aves in there with the rod just to get it in there. But what we'll do is we'll throw a little extra now. This will bond it up pretty well. You can see it kind of sticks. That's why I like Aves. Aves is really good with that, but we want to make sure we put a lot in here at least. I'm going to put a couple dabs of glue, some Instaset. Okay, that's looking good, so we got to throw a little bit in here. Alright, make sure you get your Instaset ready. I always use the BSI gel glue. Now I'm not worried if this squeezes out around the legs, it's going to get sanded down and seamed up anyway. But like this, and just, there we go. And just grab some of this. My bottles always just don't work. When you do the squeeze part, always breaks and pops on me. Every bottle I get, so I just use this as like a dropper now. It works out pretty well. Okay, get a little bit over here. Alright, so I'll let that sit for the night. Hopefully maybe the next time I have Aves or something, I can start, seaming up here, because that's what I do is use Aves, and then I can sand this down and even it all up. But we're looking pretty good. Yeah, so that's what, just get that on there for now, and hopefully next steps we can get going with that. Alright, so I used a bunch of Aves to get this leg going, and when I was looking at it at this angle coming here, I realized the leg wasn't smooth. I filled up here, and then when I looked over here, it's all this jaggedness that was kind of like up and down. So I figured since I had all this Aves mixed up, I just kind of bring down the Aves all around here. So when I sand this leg down, I'll get that nice curve going. I also had to try to get underneath as well. Under there, you can kind of see it's kind of messy, but yeah, just taking off that boot, and because it was broken and all that, we have to kind of rebuild it. So I'm going to do some sanding down probably tomorrow, the next day, or hopefully whenever I can once this is cured up. But it just gives you guys an idea how I kind of rebuilding this leg and getting it back together. Hey guys, so we're going to do a little bit of an update real quick. I'm at the point now where I got this leg on, it's all nice and smooth, and everything worked out pretty good with the leg. So as you can see, we're looking pretty good now. So now I'm trying, alright, what do I do next? Do I do the arms, do I do the skirt, do I do the hair? Cape is almost done, so I'll probably get the cape in probably another couple days. But I figured, let me start planning out the skirt work. I'm not going to do it yet because I think I'm going to do the arms first. I'm going to put the arms in. We're going to do the whole thing of adding metal rods with magnets and get them in there. And then once the arms are removable and they're done, I can focus on the skirt and then the hair, and she'll be ready to go. Hair is definitely last. I'll be able to wrap her up in saran wrap, and I'll be able to work on the hair without messing anything up. But so when I was looking at the skirts online and her pictures, and I realized that the mini skirt comes down way lower than when I had the original line. Because I had the original line here, it actually comes down like there. So here's the belly button, and then we got about that much room. So we're looking pretty good there with that line. As I was working on the back of the line back here, I realized that the original sash was like here, and my original line was above that sash, and I wouldn't have to worry about that mess up. And now I'm coming lower, so I had to work out the little V, because you have your tailbone and then your spine, and you got these like dimples, because it's like a V here almost. So I'm just kind of working this out a little bit. We're not going to go crazy with the dimples back there, but at least it gives you an idea with like a little bit of a V. The other thing too is, of course, with her legs bent like this, and if you look underneath, you're going to see her underwear. So I'm working out the line work with the underwear. It's going to be painted blue, which is fine. I thought it was painted white in the comics, but I guess it's always blue. But you could always do what you want. It's your custom statue, you know. But I'll do the underwear lines there next, and then we'll do the arms. At least I could get these. I don't have to come all the way up here, because I don't want it like showing through the skirt. But at least we'll get something under there, at least for when I do my paint work. So the other thing too is I'm working out the skirt line, so you can kind of see I'm like, all right, so this is going to come like right under the butt there. It's going to come over here, and then we got to kind of come underneath the butt here as well. So I was looking online, and here's some images I was using for when I was doing my Orisa Green Lantern. Now this one right here is going to work out pretty good. We kind of zoom in a little bit here, so you can kind of see that it's got that tautness of a mini skirt from like the 90s era. So I'm going to use this image here to kind of give me the idea of the back of her. So it'll kind of have a come under there a little bit, and then we'll have some like wrinkles back here. We'll do a little bit of that line work maybe in the center. Maybe we'll do another line work over here as well. We'll have a little bit of wrinkles here. Nothing too crazy. I don't want to make it too wrinkly. So the only difference is the front. We're going to have to follow this image a little bit more for her front, because the Orisa Green Lantern kind of fell down because hers was a little bit looser, but this is tighter, so we got to kind of have it like at like sharper tautness, like it's really short, but it's like, you know, taunt. The other thing too is when you do a custom like this, you got to think of paint work. Of course, if this was going to be mass produced, I'm pretty sure they would design it where the leg kind of glues in underneath the skirt, and it'd be easier to paint. But since this is like a one-of-a-kind custom, we got to kind of at least make sure I have enough room to get the paint under there. So that's going to be a little bit tricky. So I'm just, like I said, you just got to kind of plan this stuff out while you're working on the item. Now the other thing too is, like I said, we're going to work on the arms next. We'll do the underwear lines and then the arms. So her arms, as you can see, are set up like that. They got that little black piece, little cuff of the shoulder. So we're going to pretty much cut off the arm there, and it's going to go with underneath the cuff. So what we'll do is we're going to use Magic Sculpt and glue. We're going to get the arm in there, and then what I'll be able to do is kind of bring it down a little bit more. We'll do some sculpt work. We'll make a bare arm, and then I'm going to saw it off. And then what I'll do is once I sawed it off and I got it to where I want it, then I can actually get in there with the magnet, and we can start building out the cuffs and the wrinkles and stuff around there. So that would be the next step too. So once we get past that, we get on the skirt. I'll probably also have an update with the cape soon, and then the last will be the hair, and then she'll be ready to go. Alright, so it's been a few days. The Magic Sculpt and the glue is all cured up nicely. I went into the garage just now and I dremeled out a lot of the glove area. What I'm going to do now is I got some extra A's, and I'm going to rebuild the arms with the A's. I'm going to basically build the structure of the arms back together. Once that's pretty much built up, you figure right about there is where I'll saw it off again. I just find it's easier to build the arm up, get your basic structure, and then saw it off where you need to saw it off, because if the saw it off here, and then you try to make the glove, and then you build down and everything, it just doesn't work that well, at least in my experience. So we'll get this going, and then you'll see as things progress, it'll be a lot easier. Alright, so yesterday I had a chance to sand down the arms and then prime it up. So I'm looking pretty good and I'm really happy with it. So what I'm trying to do now is mark out where the cuffs are going to go. I keep going back and forth whenever I do customs. Do I want to chop off the arms? Don't I want to chop off the arms? You know, so I'm thinking, you know, this will probably be easier for shipping and just moving it around and everything, just to make sure life is just easier to paint it and stuff. So I'm definitely going to chop off the arms. Now, as you can see, I'm kind of marking out. I want the cup to be almost the same size of this piece here, but right now I'm just kind of marking out ideas. So this bottom line, like right there and right there, is where it's going to go. So if I sand this off a little bit, which is kind of like almost like erasing, basically. So it's going to kind of come down right about there, where that cup will be. Now this little line right here is where I'm going to saw off the arm. Same thing what I'm going to do on this side. So the bottom of the cuff will kind of come over to the skin when when we make it attachable. But at least right here, this is where I'm going to saw it off, because you don't want to saw it off like right here, and then you build the cuff, and then you have to bring it down a little bit. So then you're bringing the cuff down more. So you kind of want to plan out where you're sawing. Now as far as sawing wise, I guess we'll go set up in the garage and I'll kind of show you how I'm going to saw these off. You got to kind of go on a nice strong, you know, straight angle, and you just got to go slow. I use basically like a handsaw, hacksaw. You just take your time, you go nice and slow, and you can get even if it's just a little bit of an angle, it's not the end of the world, as long as between here and here we have it sawed off, so this way we can make everything flush. It's a little bit of an extra step, but it makes life easier just to try to do all the sculpting around here and all this stuff. So let's get into the garage and we'll get these off. So I got her on my workbench and I put a towel on her because we don't want to do any kind of like slips, because if you slip and you push her, or if you're rubbing it back and forth, you can mess up a lot of your sculpt. So this right here is just your typical metal handsaw. So what I do is I position the statue to where I want it. I get it at the angle I want, like right about there, and just got to kind of get your guide. Now they do have smaller blades. You know, you can get you know, like miniature saws and stuff. I like using this only because just going nice and slow goes right through it, and I got a better grip on it. Now you don't need to go crazy. Just let the blade do its work, especially with resin and the Magic Sculpt and the Aves. And you just gotta make sure you're going at the right angle too. So I'm kind of like leaning down looking at it. Probably won't see it from the camera. Now if I put a metal rod in there to do this, it would have been a nightmare, because you got to cut through the rod and you got to get the rod out. So it's better just to kind of use glue and the Magic. Now you got to be careful too, once you start getting through the piece, that you don't want to saw anything that's, you know, you don't want to saw the back, the side, her rib cage, or any of that. So I'm going to like bring it up more a little bit at this angle, go down there, just to kind of make sure my guides are still going straight. Now, if you're doing this and they have hands on the statue still, you got to have either someone help you or go really slow near the end, because you don't want to drop the hand and the arm at the same time, then you'll break fingers. Now, at that point, we're almost at the bottom. So what I like to do is I like to stop at this point. And this kind of helps me when I put the piece back together. What I like to do is just kind of snap it off now. So you have a little bit of a, like usually I let a little bit more. I went a little too far. But when I go to put this back, I want to try to keep that gap there. You know what I'm saying? Because if you sew all the way through and then you push it, you kind of shrink the arm. So that's kind of like helping me with a little bit of a guide that there's a gap there. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew off the other arm. And then we can start drumming out and getting everything planned out. So I got to have her at this angle probably like that. Alright, so on this one I didn't go as far, but kind of far, so we usually just kind of snap it off. So you see how that kind of broke off there with some of the glue? Like that was kind of like the glue and stuff. That's not a problem because that's going to get kind of covered anyway. But that kind of helps me with a guide now, so at least I know that when I put her back on there, at least with the peg, I got to have that gap. If you use a super thick saw, or if you use like a Dremel bit like this and you go through, you lose all that meat. You know, you got to consider about how much you use the saw off, so that you got to have that kind of a gap. So that kind of helps me out with that little piece there, but that'll get fixed up. That's not a problem. So, alright, so the next step is, what we got to do is we got to go in there with the Dremel tool, which is this one. This is my tile cutting bit. I like this a lot. You got to be careful though, a brand new one, because a brand new one will like grab a lot. So we got to cut out the holes on each arm so we can fit in the pegs and the magnet. Okay, so while we're in the garage, we're going to start working out the pins for the arms. Now, this is metal key stock. It's steel, and it is magnetized, as you can see. You don't want to get the zinc stuff. The zinc stuff I use for bottom of feet going in and out of the base, but when you ever magnetize, you got to use at least steel. So it comes in different sizes, but this one I think says, it's all rubbed off on there, I forget the size of it. But you get all kinds of different sizes with this. So what I did is I put it in this arm here, and then I made myself a little marker with it. So that's as far as we want to go. We don't need to go in too deep. As long as this metal hits the magnet that's inside the shoulder, we're good to go. So right here is, you know, the tool that I use to saw off the arms. These are metal blades, so these are like fine tips. So this works out great for cutting resin, and then it also works out great for cutting the steel. So what I also do is, when this piece right here is going to be the jagged part, I'll probably put a couple notches in around here as well, just so when I put this into the hand, into the arm, the Magic Sculpt or A's, whatever I use, will sink into the pieces in there just to grip it a little bit more. But right here, it's nice and smooth up top. So what I do is I have my little tool over here, and then what I do is I'll make this flat, and then what I do is I rub it like this. So we could kick it on. I'll show you exactly what I do. Now the reason why I do that, excuse all the dust, but the reason why I do that is just so it's not like all jagged up top and it hits any of that hollow brass rod stuff. So, you know, this is the hollow brass rod stuff here. It's going to go in and out. This right here is not clean, So what you do is you put this on. And then while it's still fairly warm, you can kind of work out the piece in here. So you get this little, so you get your little mechanism. Now this is a little bit jagged up here. If you have a sand tool, which is right here, just get an emery board. And you can kind of just clean it up a little. So, see how it goes. Now sometimes you might get a couple of these key stocks where they're just a little bit too tight in here. So as you can see here, maybe what I do is I kind of grinded down the edging a little bit, just a little bit, so it goes in there fairly well. So the reason why I sand this down is because it doesn't hit there. Because if this is like a straight point like this one here, it kind of like, you kind of grab it and it doesn't go in too well. But when you have a nice smooth edge, it just goes right in. Alright, so I'm going to saw this off, I'll get the other ones made, and then we can just keep plugging away. Alright, so at this point, we got to figure out what size magnets we're going to use. And it's always better to kind of plan this out ahead of time in case I have to do any little more dremeling. So I got these magnets here, which I think might work out pretty good, we'll see. What I like to do is just put the magnet on there, and then place it into here, just to make sure we have enough meat, you know, enough room. And that one's looking pretty good, so I think we're going to be good with that magnet. I've done it in the past where I wasn't paying attention and I used a huge magnet. I did my whole key system and it wouldn't go into the area I needed to put it in. But I think these will work out pretty good now. So you also got to test the other one too. It's not perfect right now, but it just gives you an idea if we have enough meat and room or if I have to do any more Dremel work. So this one's looking pretty good as well. Okay, so next step. We get some Magisculpt or Aves, and then we fill these in and let these cure overnight. Alright, so it's been about like 8 hours, 9 hours since I did these in the morning, so it's a good time to actually get a little bit extra done for the night. So the next step is you want to take the hollow brass rod and make sure that everything's going in there fine. So what I like to do is just take off the rod, kind of even it out, and give myself a little bit of a mark. Then what you do is come over here. Now this is a little bit tricky. This right here, you don't want to just like do manhandling, saw this and off, because if you do, you warp it. So if you sit here and you try to manhandle this and just like rip it off, what you'll probably do is maybe you'll like kind of just warp up the square piece and it doesn't fit in there. So you just want to kind of take it. It doesn't matter if you go, you don't want to go too far in, but you don't, it's okay if you go too far out. So I kind of just go a little bit extra. So I like to just pull it. And you don't want to crush this either, because if you crush this, you just got to kind of find a middle ground with this. And then once you start getting into the hollow, it grabs because you don't have all that metal. So at this point, just kind of pull it in. This stuff just cuts very easy. And then when you get down to that flat part, it pops right out. Alright, so after that, what you want to do is find it wherever it went. It's a little bit hot because you sawed it. So you put it onto the piece here, and it's a little bit messy up top. Hold on. So it's a little bit messy up there, and the magnet's not going to touch it perfectly. So if you have, well, let me get my glasses. Alright, so always make sure you have your goggles on. So what I like to do is grab the piece like so, or grab it like this way, whichever way, you know, it's fine. Kick on this tool if you have one of these. Now it's going to be really, really hot, so don't try and grab it with your fingers. Put this onto there. Oh, of course it falls off. Alright, so at that point, as you can kind of see, it's pretty much iron. So now the magnet's actually going to be touching the metal. So that's what we want. So I'm going to fix up the other one. Always make sure too that you're so that's a little bit better that way, so you can kind of see. So I'll get the other one done, and then we'll get in there and we'll start attaching them. Alright, so we have the hollow brass rods on there, and then we put the magnet. So what happens is this is going to be creating the key system for these pieces. And I've done this a bunch of times in other videos, but it's always good to show people new that might have not seen the other ones. So this is Magic Sculpt. Got it all going, and what I'd like to do is just kind of flatten it out. Now you don't want to glue this on here, because if you glue it then you might glue the metal to the magnet. We don't want to do that. We want to basically create this key on the outside. So you just take some Magic Sculpt A's, whatever you got, and just wrap it around the piece. Now you try to keep it as thin as you possibly can. Otherwise it just won't go into the hollow part. We might have to do some sanding on this just to fit. We might have to rework the hole a little bit in the arm. And then you let this cure up overnight. Now the other thing too is be careful when you do these two that you don't accidentally sit these next to each other, because then they'll click. I've done that in the past, didn't pay attention, and what happens is the Magic Sculpt bonds to the Magic Sculpt, and it's like that. So you want to keep them far apart. But I mean, you know, any other type of materials that you have that works like Magic Sculpt or Aves, you can use it. You know, whatever's easier for you. I just like to use these types of stuff on the items. But these will be good, nice removable arms for Supergirl, and make life a little bit easier. If you put too much up there, you can always just pull it off. Now it's not going to, like, you know, you can still pop this magnet off by accident if you're not careful when it cures. So you got to kind of toy with it. But it's getting in there pretty well. So what we'll do is we'll let this cure up overnight, and then we'll get these into the arms tomorrow. Alright, so what I did now is I made sure that each arm fit in pretty well. I also did a black marker just to give me a guide, as you can see. And I mixed up fresh Magic Sculpt. The reason why I use Magic Sculpt is it gets a little bit tougher, and it also is pretty soft when you first mix it up like Aves, except it will cure, it will harden up a little bit faster than Aves. So just a matter of taking it. Now you got to be careful to you don't want to make this too much of a eggshell whenever you're putting a piece in there, because if you go to push something in there, it can actually just split it and crack it, and then it's a nightmare. So I had to drum out a little bit more, not much, but just a little bit more. And what I like to do too is before we put this in there, just kind of give a little bit of a guide. And then hopefully this should just go in there pretty well. Go slow, you don't have to go crazy. Kind of line it up. And if you get it nice and everything works, you should be able to pull this out and out. Now I did warp it a little bit when I pulled it out, but as it starts to kind of cure up over the next hour or so, this will work out. So what you can do is you can take some more of your Magic Sculpt and you can push it in. Now the thing you got to be careful about is you don't want to, like, if you go to put this back in here and test, you want to go slow and you want to get it in there and let it click. Because if you don't let it click, you might push it in further, and then the metal is not touching the magnet. Now if you want to, you can just let your item sit like this for a while, as long as there's no Magic Sculpt touching this. But you just kind of want to make sure it's working, so we're pretty much good to go. So I'll get the other ones set up, and then hopefully by the next step these are all done, ready to go, and we can start cleaning that up and sculpting the cups. Alright, it's been about 2 hours or so. Magic Sculpting age pretty much hardens and cures up to that 3 hour point. So usually takes like 6 to 8 hours to cure, but we're looking pretty good now at the point where I can put this arms in and out and they come out with no problem. So we got a nice good connection on each one, as you can see. So we're looking good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to kind of fill up these areas in here a little bit more with Magic Sculpt, just to kind of clean that up. You could use A's, Magic Sculpt, whatever you got. I got some Magic Sculpt left over. And then I decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the hands to each arm. Just get them attached and ready to go. So this way it'll be a little bit easier to fill in these lines on these hands with holding up a hand and arm like this, instead of trying to do it like this with this little piece here and there. So we'll get all this stuff attached now and just keep going. Alright, so it's near the end of the day and we were pretty good. We got the arms in there, so that's pretty much cured up by now. The hands are attached. I really like the way the pose is now. We got a nice good, clenched fist here, like, and an open fist there, like a good comic book feel. Other than that, all I really did off camera was I had some extra A's and I put some A's around this hand here. I put some extra Magic Sculpt around there too, because I figured by tomorrow when I go to sand this down, at least this will be locked in place, and then I can sculpt the cuffs around there for the gloves as well. So we're looking pretty good. So everything's locked into place. The keys work out very well. What else I got to do is kind of just sand down the metal a little bit just to make it a little bit smoother. It's got some residue around there from some of the Magic Sculpt and stuff. That's not the end of the world. But other than that, we're looking pretty good. So next step is tomorrow. We'll start working out the keys a little bit more up there. We'll do some more of the shirt and cuffs. And then we'll clean up some of this. And then after that, we're going to work on the skirt. We'll get the hair going because I did get the cape in. The cape is ready to go. So we'll show you that down the line. And then the very last thing we'll do is we clean up the base and we'll put the laces tied up on the boots.